Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Dallas Social Toastmasters. It is December 3rd of 2020, and of course, we are still virtual. Let me go through a couple of things. Even though Rob is your official Zoom coordinator tonight, I'm going to at least go through the agenda with you and show you how you can find our agenda. Best way to do that is off of our website, which is DallasSocialToastmasters.com. You'll see it right there. And if you go to that website, under the members section here on the right-hand side, you will see current agenda. If you click on the current agenda, it will bring up this copy of the agenda, which is our roles and duties, for this evening. And our theme for this evening is repeal of prohibition. So that's what I will be talking about and giving you some information about. Couple of other things with regard to Zoom, of course. I think everybody's pretty much used to most of the features. Remember, if you are speaking and doing something that needs to be timed, to make sure that your timer is available so that you can see your timer. And the timer for this evening is going to be Dagon Newland. So make sure the Dagon is either visible or pinned so that you always have visibility for the timing flags. Timing colors. Do I have any other business that I really want to do? Oh, and of course you can choose speaker view or gallery view. Since we have, at least at the moment, 9 people, everybody should appear in a gallery view at one time. If we get above that, then people start getting pushed off the screen at the bottom potentially. So, or to a second screen. So that is at least another alternative for you. And that is on the view section. If you're on a PC or a Mac, it's in the upper right-hand corner, just to the right of all of the smaller video icons. Let me go ahead and get started. I want to talk about, and I'm going to have to get my head out of the way long enough, U.S. prohibition ends. I want to talk just a little bit about prohibition. And the reason that I picked that for tonight is December 5th of 1933 is when prohibition actually officially ended. And that, of course, is 2 days from now on Saturday. You may actually find that there are repeal of prohibition parties. There certainly have been throughout the years. It's hard to believe it's been 87 years. I want to talk just a little bit about what it all was and meant, and some of the things that are still holdovers, even after a full 87 years in existence. So first of all, what is prohibition? Prohibition was enacted to prohibit the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors. And at the time, before Prohibition, which would have been before 1919, beer was the predominant liquor or alcoholic beverage that was consumed in America. Beer came over here very, very, very early. And the American colonists and Americans have always loved beer. But as of January 18th of 1919, there was an amendment, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution made alcohol illegal. What all led up to that? Well, long before that, there had been several states that had actually already outlawed alcohol in their state. Some of them as far back as even before the 1900s. But at that point, there was a large enough cry from enough people in enough states to get a constitutional amendment to make it illegal. Some states had as many as 1 saloon for every 80 people, which is a very, very high ratio. And that includes women and children even. During the time before the Prohibition, there had been some abuses. And it was all of the abuses that caused the consternation and for Prohibition to come about. One of the biggest ones was probably what were called tied stores, T-I-E-D stores. And that's something that we don't have today. Tied stores would be when a brewery would open a saloon. So a brewery would basically open a saloon to sell their beer. And obviously they were also transporting the beer into that saloon as well. In some cases, they didn't actually own the saloon, but what they would do is they would give huge discounts if the bartenders and owners there would only sell their product. And I hate to say it, but that's very, very similar to Coke and Pepsi today. Coke and Pepsi, they'll go in and say, if you'll only sell Coke products, we'll sell it to you a lot cheaper so you get a higher profit. Pepsi does the same thing. And so that's why in a lot of places, if you go in and say Pepsi, they go, no, we only have Coke, or vice versa. But the same thing was happening with breweries and saloons, and it caused a lot of abuses, because can you imagine going into a bar and you can only buy one kind of beer? In many cases, that's all you were offered because it came from that either arrangement or from that particular brewery. You had no choice. It's really hard to keep your business up when that happens. So what actually was occurring? What was occurring was, well, a little bit of everything. With no competition like that, people were doing all sorts of things that they should not be doing. They were serving drunks that they knew were already drunk. They were way over serving people to keep people drinking. They would occasionally have gambling in the back rooms. They would have prostitution going on in the back rooms. And it is actually believed that the venereal disease going back home into the homes and the families is what caused a lot of the women to be anti-drinking and pro-prohibition as well. So there were just a lot of abuses that were going on, and nobody was really policing it very, very well. So prohibition was then put through. That caused its own problems. Let me actually just show you a couple of what I want to do here is I do want to show you a few, and I know I have to get the share started first. Let me get the share started first, because if I don't get this share started first, I lose the ability to show the app. All right, nope, not that one. That's the wrong window. Every time, gotta move it so I can get something out of the way. There we go. Discard, okay. That's what I want. Go. So during Prohibition, what you would see is a lot of scenes like this, and this one was obviously done for the purposes of publicity, probably for a newspaper. Somebody with a hatchet destroying some beer in beer barrels. This, of course, is Carrie Nation. She was famous for going in and hatcheting beer bottles or in saloons and beer casks. And you can probably bet that that's a Bible in her hand that she's holding, just because she looks like a barrel of sunshine, doesn't she? But then we get to December 5th, 1933, when Prohibition finally happens. Or excuse me, the repeal of Prohibition finally happens. The problem of Prohibition had been that it became a great opportunity for organized crime. In fact, it probably was where organized crime perfected some of their organizational skills, because they got really, really, really good during Prohibition at bootlegging, transporting alcohol. To this day, you are still going to see Toastmasters clubs that are named Speakeasy, but that's not what Speakeasy meant. It did not mean it was easy to speak. Speakeasy was speak quietly, because that was how you gained entrance to a speakeasy, which was a place that was hidden to be served alcohol during Prohibition. Prohibition was really a horrible failure. You could actually go into the grocery store and buy all of the ingredients to make beer, along with the warning label on it that said, do not let this sit for so many hours, because if you do, alcohol will ferment in it. They would not tell you that it was going to make beer, but it was basically a beer making kit, with the warning that if you let it sit long enough, you were going to end up with alcohol. And that was a warning label. So organized crime is in it. There is a rule called the Iron Law of Prohibition, which basically states that as the enforcement of prohibited drugs increases, that the potency of the drugs that they're trying to inhibit increases as well. Beer had been the thing that had been the most important to Americans up until Prohibition. You saw those beer barrels, they're large, they're hard to transport, they're hard to hide. You can't put them in the back of a vehicle easily. So suddenly, because of organized crime taking it over and having to hide it, the more potent spirits, all of the whiskeys, the gins, and everything that comes in bottles became much, much more popular. And so a lot of people during Prohibition were drinking hard liquor instead of just the beer that they had been drinking before then. So there was a very, very large shift to liquor. Ultimately, all of the problems that this caused were as bad or worse than before Prohibition. And in fact, a lot of the prohibitionists were eventually in favor of its repeal. So of course, this is one of the headlines of the day. Here's another photo, and boy, I really love that one lady right there in front with the glass that she's got. That's quite a glass. If you're only allowed one glass a day, that's going to be the glass you want. But when the 18th Amendment was overturned or repealed by the 21st Amendment, which again happened on December 5th, 2 days from now, many years ago, it put every state on its own in terms of what they were going to do to prevent the abuses of the past. There had been some analysis done that recommended one of two approaches. The two approaches were that either the US government, or, well, in this case, the state governments, needed to run the liquor stores. And there are a lot of states that chose that option, government-run liquor stores. I've actually seen them. I've been in one. It's really, really weird. It's a nondescript building, and when you go in, you do not get to walk the aisles. At least not in that particular state. You did not get to walk the aisles. You would go up to a window and order what you wanted, and they would go in the back and get it. That was it. So if you didn't know they had it, you were not getting it. And the goal of that was to take all of the profit out of it, because it was the profit that had caused the problem in the first place. Staying open late hours, selling to minors, all of the things that had occurred, all the gambling, was all to keep people drinking, to raise the profits. And as a result, if you give it to the states, well, we certainly know that states and governments can't make money off of anything, so that took all the profit out of it. The other alternative was what's called the three-tier plan. I'll show you another picture here. That guy looks like a gangster to me all by himself. I don't know whether this was actually pre or post Prohibition. But the three-tier plan basically broke the liquor industry into three different sections. You either made liquor, i.e. you were a brewer or you were a distiller. Your second choice was you were a distributor, and for any of you who have seen Ben E. Keith trucks distributing liquor or alcohol in the city, that's what they do. And then there's the third, and those are the people who are either the liquor stores or restaurants who sell to consumers. And the rule for many, many years right after Prohibition was never the twain shall meet. You're one of the three, you can't do more than one. And there are a lot of rules having to do with making sure that there are no price fixes, no incentives. It basically broke that connection between it's brewed here or made here and consumed here. You could not have the same person doing any of that. And the goal being to increase competition, stop the monopoly where you only had one choice, and basically to give them to have, no incentive to cause people to overdrink, etc. It's 87 years later. That method, the three-tiered system, is still in effect, and we still have that here in the state of Texas for the most part. Over the years, there have been a few exceptions made to it. I can tell you what a couple of them are, and there are a few that really make sense. There are a few that almost don't. One of the ones that does make sense, if you've ever been into a brew pub, there are brew pubs now. They're small brewers. They are brewing beer on site, and you can go in and get a beer and they can sell it to you. So they're actually making beer and they're selling beer. They are not transporting it except to your table because they can't take it out of the restaurant. They have to brew it in the restaurant and sell it to you in the restaurant. That is one of the exceptions now. One of the other ones that's an exception, I believe wineries are probably an exception in many states now, because wineries, obviously, if you go to a winery, you can order the wine and they can sell you a case of wine. So that's yet another case where alcohol is being made by someone and sold by the same party to the final consumer. So that's also an exception. And I think one of my favorites, and I think this is actually even in Texas, there is an exception for a manufacturer of alcohol to sell it to consumers if they own a marine water park. Yeah, if they own a marine water park. Why in the world is that the case? Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch happens to own SeaWorld. They wanted to be able to sell their beer in SeaWorld. They were big enough, had a big enough backing behind them to push through an exception. Very unusual, not something that you would expect. Yet another picture. You can tell there are a lot of people who look really, really happy, except this one guy up here in the middle of the picture that kind of looks like, oh my God, my mom is going to see me in this photo or something, or my wife or something. I don't know. Wonder who that woman is and whether or not she's with him. But a lot of happy, happy, happy people. Parties broke out everywhere after the repeal. And just wanted to give everybody an idea. Oops, it went backwards. I don't know why you did that. I never had to go backwards before. Wanted to give everybody a little bit of history of how our liquor laws are the way they are. They certainly weren't this way throughout history. There are a lot of restrictions that are in place that seem arbitrary and stupid, but they were put in place to prevent some of the abuses of the past. And finally, I don't know about you, but 2020 me can now drink college me under the table thanks to, hey, we're in COVID time. Day drinking has become a thing. And I don't care what they tell you. They may say alcohol is nothing but empty calories, but it is not true. Inside every little drop of alcohol, there is just a teeny bit of happiness. So enjoy, everybody. As we get to December 5th coming up, celebrate the repeal of Prohibition. With that, I'm going to go ahead and call on some of our duty holders to tell you what they're doing. Let's start with our timer. Dagan, tell us what you'll be doing tonight as timer.
All right, as timer, I'll be timing the different sections of the meeting. That'll be the prepared speeches, the table topics, and evaluations. So tonight, both our speakers shows we have 5 to 7 minutes. So once they hit the, of course, I'll start off with the gray background, but once they hit the minimum time of 5 minutes, they'll hit the green. And they get 6 minutes halfway through, they get the yellow. And when they get 7 minutes, they'll get the red and have 30 seconds to wrap up. Of course, again, you have 30 seconds leeway on either side there. And on table topics, you'll get the green at 1 minute, 1.5 yellow, and 2 minutes to get the red. Then you're gonna have 30 seconds to wrap up. But on table topics, you must hit 1 minute. But between 1 minute and 2 minutes and 30 seconds to qualify. And evaluations at 2 minutes, you'll get the green, 2.5 yellow, and 3 get the red. And for that, you have 30 seconds leeway on either side to qualify. And I'll give my report when called upon. Back to you, Toastmasters.
Thank you. Lee, you are down for both posture bell and hot counter. Can you do both of those except while you're doing your speech, and I'll take care of it for that period of time? Lee, are you on mute?
Yes, I can do both. As posture monitor, I will be watching for particularly good uses of posture and awkward posture. Of course, right now we are a little bit restricted within our camera space, but I'll do the best I can. Also, as all counter, I'll listen for awkward uses. I'm sorry, crutch words, such as so any other crutch words that are not needed in speech, and I will give a report at the end of the meeting. To Mr. Tillieville, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Lee. Next up, we have our vote counter. Vote counter for this evening is Tanya Howard. Tanya, tell us what you'll be doing for us tonight.
Good evening. As a vote counter this evening, we will be tallying votes for the best speaker, best evaluator, also for table topics, and at the end we will vote for the big three, which is Toastmaster, General Evaluator, and Topics Master. You in the chat can send me your vote directly, and I will tabulate the votes. At the end of our meeting, we will recognize those individuals. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Our final duty holder for this evening is going to be our grammarian, is Rob Giles. Rob, tell us what the grammarian does.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. The grammarian takes care of two things. One is to listen for grammar throughout the meeting, specifically any interesting uses of the English language, interesting phrases, as well as any egregious or poor grammar uses. So watch your P's and Q's, and I'll take note of it throughout the meeting. The other part of my duty is to introduce the word of the day. Watching your P's and Q's, if you do well enough, you might just be a brainiac. That is the word of the day, brainiac. It is a very intelligent person. And we have a lot of brainiacs in our club. What can I say? You do have to use that word during table topics in order to qualify to win table topics. So please be aware of that. Please keep that in mind. I will go ahead and I will post the word of the day in the chat to everybody so you can be reminded. I'll also hold up that word during table topics so that you can be reminded as well. I will give a report of all grammar throughout the entire meeting at the end of the meeting when called upon by the general evaluator. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Rob. I have to admit, I'm wondering about what the etymology of that word is, whether or not there was actually a computer that ever took on that moniker or not. I don't know. So I suppose it's possible. All right, tonight we have two speakers, and we will go ahead and get right to that. I have to admit, I did go through all of what I planned to do with regard to the repeal of prohibition early, because it just all seemed to flow. So I will not have to be interjecting myself at other points. Took a little bit longer to do that, but I won't have to do anything else on that for the rest of the meeting. At this point, our two speakers are, of course, Mark Sims and Lee King, in that order. Evaluating Mark Sims is going to be Tanya Howard. Since Mark will be going first, Tanya, tell us what Mark's goals are this evening.
Good evening. Mark's goal is to speak between 5 and 7 minutes, and he is going to be reflecting on his thoughts and feelings about a situation and his ability to think about how he could have handled the situation more positively. And so he will be speaking about positive solutions to trying problems. For trying problems, sorry, can't read my own. So thank you. That's Mark Sims' top title.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. If you would, please welcome Mark Sims for his speech entitled Positive Solutions to Trying Problems. Positive Solution to Trying Problems, Mark Sims.
Thank you. We should always see the best in others. People are basically good. I get that. We should see things from the other person's point of view. Well, these are all very good thoughts, noble sentiments. And on a really, really good day where everything's going perfect, I believe them and I act that way. But that's not very frequently. Usually when we're in the midst of doing things, whether it's work, getting other things done, and we're dealing with other people, there are inevitably going to be some frustrations come up. And when we have problems with other people, then those positive thoughts I just mentioned go away and the mental knives come out. You may think about someone at work and think, well, that jerk, that so-and-so, he never did like me, always been out to get me. If you're dealing with a third party trying to get something done, you may think the service here is terrible. If you simply have a lot of things, problems dumping on you, you think this is terrible. I get all the bad luck in the world. Well, those are not very positive, noble thoughts, but they are probably more realistic at times than we would like them to be. So when we have some frustrations, especially when it involves dealing with other people, we need to take a more disciplined, more positive, more proactive approach to handling those situations better, reframing them in a positive way. Positive not necessarily meaning ha-ha, laughing, everything's fine, but a direct, affirmative way that can appeal to the better instincts of the other person. Example one, in the last few years at my job, on occasion, there's been times where someone temporarily working for me would come in late, would shave hours, either come in a little late or leave a little early. And as background, I don't have a staff of permanent employees, but people that are permanent employees from my organization will at times work for me on temporary projects for several weeks. So in those circumstances, I don't always handle it well. Sometimes I'll just look the other way, put the shades on it, just don't rock the boat, let their supervisor deal with it. But then what happens is over time, I get a little more irritated. So of course, the aggravation comes out in an unhealthy way. And the last time this happened, I wanted to make sure I addressed it directly. So I talked to the person involved who I thought was not giving all of his hours for me. And I said, I'm very disappointed in you. Well, once he started talking and maybe explaining his point of view, it was a little more balanced. Because, for example, he would come in late, but he would generally work late. He would also work during lunch. And maybe if I had taken the time to first be positive, to praise the good things he had going on, and then to maybe more diplomatically bring out that I wasn't sure that I or he were getting all the hours that we needed, that I probably could have handled that in a more balanced and positive manner. So definitely there are positive and negative ways to handle situations of that type. Another recent example where I was dealing with a non-coworker was I came home after going through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant, and I saw that my order was incorrect, and it was going to be too much trouble to drive back there to replace it. And so once I finished eating, I called the establishment. I told them what happened, and I was just looking for some discount or some coupon for the next trip through, some recognition that I had had a subpar service. The person I talked to agreed to that, but then just before the end of the phone conversation, she threw in a little zinger. She said, it's just not worth arguing about. I'm not going to quibble over a few pieces of chicken. And I just couldn't let it go. So I inquired, and what I found out is she really didn't believe me. Now, in a situation like that, a positive thing, again, not necessarily a friendly thing, but a more positive, beneficial way to handle that would have been to say, okay, I'll discuss this with someone else, and then go up the food chain, I mean, lame pun intended, and to talk to someone else about the problem. But you know what I did. I got mad, said, I haven't been a customer X amount of time. I'll never come to your place again. And if I'd had a landline, I could have slammed it down. As it was with the cell phone, that wasn't advisable. So instead of getting some recompense for my difficulties, I just ended up being mad. And another example, and sometimes difficulties with other people, you really can't interact with them. And this is another fast food example, but at Chick-fil-A, where there's a couple of different drive-through lanes, the other lane that I'm not in is going through very expeditiously. The lane I'm in is held up because of one person who's taking several minutes to order a meal. And it's not just someone a little bit of time, it's a lot of time, and it's very noticeable. And it's on my lunch hour, I'm getting aggravated, and there is not a thing really in the world that I could do about it except just fume, just be mad. Well, what I could have done is reframe that in my own mind, just giving myself a better perspective, saying, okay, this happened, but it happens to everyone once in a while. Usually service at this place is very good. And then, quite honestly, at times I'm that guy that I was critical of. I may be fishing through my pockets for exact change, or I may change my mind on an order. So at some time we may all be the person that we are criticizing. In summary, there are positive and negative ways to deal with these difficult situations, and we should all strive to be more positive. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Mark. Very nice speech. You raised some very interesting points, of course, in that, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. You also never know whether or not somebody else has had a really, really bad day that has nothing to do with you and nothing to do with your behavior or your actions. And it's still easy to assume that they were doing it just to get you when probably doesn't have anything to do with it. All right, let's move on to our second speaker. Our second speaker this evening is Lee King. Lee's evaluator this evening is Rob Giles. Rob, please explain to us what Lee's goals are tonight.
First, I'd like to say that prohibition is over. So Mark, when you're in that situation, you know what to do when you get home.
Well, that may be a good solution. I wish someone had told me prohibition was over. I ought to read the newspapers more.
Well, it hasn't been published since 1933, so there you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. Lee King is working out of Pathways, and he's working on a project leading in your volunteer organization, And the purpose of his project is for him to apply the skills needed to successfully lead in a volunteer organization. The purpose of his speech tonight is for him to share some aspect of his experience serving as a leader in a volunteer organization. And that's what we were looking for tonight. We should get something good because I know that Lee has a lot of great experience in these forums, especially with Toastmasters, but then I'm sure beyond. So hopefully maybe we'll get that. But as mentioned before, his speech time is 5 to 7 minutes. I don't have his title. I assume you do, Mr. Toastmaster, so I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Yes, in fact, I do. Please, everyone, welcome Lee King with his speech entitled Leadership Lessons. Leadership Lessons, Lee King.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Tonight, I will share with you some very important information, tips, things that I've learned as a leader in Toastmasters and in other leadership organizations, in other leadership roles in other organizations as well. 2020 has definitely been a very challenging year for everybody. It's been a very challenging year, especially for volunteer organizations because of the pandemic, obviously. And one thing that is mentioned very frequently on the news is that this year is the one year that charitable organizations are needed the most, yet they are able to provide the least amount of help because they are being overused, their resources are exhausted, and a lot of the organizations in which are dependent on manpower cannot have manpower, which creates a very hard situation. Give you a brief example. Meals on Wheels provides meals to the elderly who cannot go out to the grocery store. And this is an organization run by the Veterans Nurses Association. And their goal is to ensure that every older adult has a free meal. There is one problem with this organization, however. Over 75% of the people who deliver hot meals to older individuals happen to be over the age of 75 themselves. Therefore, when a pandemic strikes, the very people that need the meal are the same people that need to be quarantining. This creates a very hard situation. Let's look at Toastmasters, for example. We're used to meeting in person, and a lot of very constructive and important feedback when it comes to speaking and leading occurs in person. But this year, we've had to shift gears and do everything remotely. A final good example are the hospitals. Hospitals traditionally have never functioned without volunteers. Yet for the safety of everybody, volunteers are not allowed to work in hospitals at this time. So as you can see, 2020 has been a very challenging year. And how do you apply leadership lessons when within volunteer organizations when we're in this situation? Well, the first thing about being a leader that's most important is you have to be able to listen and get guidance from other people. And as you can see, this year, we are dependent on the guidance from other leaders, from people outside of our own norms. And we are, in some ways, going through volunteering and helping other people in the blind because we really don't know what to expect next and how we can help. So the most important thing that we can do is to listen to the advice of other people. The second most important thing in being a leader in any organization, but especially a volunteer organization, is being empathetic. Because if you're empathetic, you're down in the hole with the person that's struggling. It's easy to be sympathetic and look down into the hole of the person struggling and say, I'm here to help. But it's another to be in the hole, struggling with the person. And in some ways, I feel like in this year of 2020, as leaders, we've been in the hole, but we're all in the same hole together. We're all down in unfamiliar territory. And the neat thing about it is everybody's helping each other out. Sure, we've had our challenges in Toastmasters, for example. How do you go from being a strictly face-to-face organization to leading online meetings? But through the different organizational powers, people are listening and creating new ways for effective meetings. And there is one final thing that a leader must possess, and that is a positive attitude. The sense that when there are challenges, we will make it through. Not only as an individual, but as a collective organization. The organization will make it through. So I just leave you with those three things. What is an effective leader, especially when there's challenges? Remember, listening has never been more important. Being empathetic for others within the organization. And then finally, just keeping that positive attitude and knowing that tomorrow will be a better day. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you so much, Lee. All right, that is our second speaker for this evening. I need to ask our timer for a timer's report. How did both of our speakers do this evening?
Both speakers qualified on time.
Very, very good. All right, so that means that since we've had two speakers and they both qualified, it is time for a vote. Our vote counter for this evening is Tanya Howard. If you would, please cast a vote for one of our speakers and send your votes through private chat to, Tanya Howard. Give everybody a moment. Also, our speakers would appreciate any comments. If you would like to send comments to our speakers, I will let you do that in one of two ways. You can either send it to them directly or send them to Tanya, and Tanya will forward them, in which case it will be a teeny bit more anonymous, except for the fact, of course, that Tanya knows who said what. Give everybody just a moment. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the second portion of our meeting, which is table topics. Our table topics master for the evening is John Vessels. Please welcome John.
Hey, good evening, everybody. All right, I'm Table Topics host tonight, and Table Topics is where you get a chance to speak off the cuff or spontaneously. I'm going to ask a few questions, and I'll call upon somebody to answer that question. You must speak from minimum of 1 minute to not greater than 2.5 minutes. Watch your timer, and he'll show you what your timing is. It's Dagan tonight, so please keep Dagan in mind. The other thing about table talks is that you must use the word of the day, and Rob's showing it now, and it is brainiac. So you must use the word of the day and stay in time limit to qualify for a ribbon on Best Table Topics, or I guess a virtual ribbon. We'll just wave at you and say, yeah, you won it. Okay. So the host or the theme of tonight's meeting is prohibition, or the end of prohibition, or I just thought prohibition in general. And I've got a few prohibition related things that I kind of wanted to ask a few people about and see what your thoughts are. It's been a few years now, but there used to be Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and stuff was on the big rage and everything was going on. Do you ever think that there was a time that we needed to have prohibition again to try and control people and their drinking habits? How about you, Karen? Unmute yourself.
Hi, you all. Okay, thank you. I don't think that it would work to have these type of prohibition laws put into works at this time, because we're at the point in life where it's very hard for me at my institution where I work just to get marijuana testing, because everyone thinks it's so normal that it's the norm for everyone to smoke or to drink. Drinking is almost one of the least of our worries, although it is a worry. It is to be worried about, but it's one of the least of our worries. But that's just me being a brainiac, kind of not smoking, not drinking. So it's just me. But I don't think that it would work. I just think that we need to keep AA in mind, AAA, AAA in mind, in order to curtail these types of drinking. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Was really good. That's another good subject that you brought up. I can use that as a segue into my next question. Marijuana is getting legalized in more states all the time now. And you watch TV sometimes now, and of course, marijuana we never spoke about, whether you did it or not. You didn't talk about marijuana. And now, people on talk shows, I hit up some last night and, got really high and had a good time and, ate 40 pounds of, fish or whatever, But now they just talk so openly about it because it's legalized in so many places. So, Dagan, do you think marijuana should be legalized? It's just another way of entertaining yourself, such as alcohol?
Well, I'm not really no brainiac on the subject, but marijuana should be legalized at the federal level, I think, not just leave it from the states to decide, because marijuana, somebody that's high is not as bad as somebody that's drunk. I mean, a lot of times, if somebody gets high, they're all nice and mellow and nice, cool and calm for the most part, and just want to eat a bunch of food. Whereas alcohol affects, people. You got those angry drunks. They get out and they're really mean and they're out there driving aggressively and things like that. But if somebody's on marijuana, like I said, they're more mellow and relaxed. So I think marijuana should be legalized at the federal level and not leave it up to the states to decide. Because just for the fact, and plus, the states, when they first started legalizing marijuana, they started making money off of it. From the like the taxes and things like that. That's more income for the states. So if they do that at the federal level, I'm sure that the federal government decided to legalize itself, they'll probably put a tax on it as well. So they'll just make it more expensive. But nevertheless, it should be across the United States. And when it becomes legalized, I never tried it before, but if it becomes legalized, I might just try it. Back to you, Toastmaster. Table Talk Master.
Thank you, Dagan. Now, let's talk to Manish. Would you like to do a table topics question for us?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I would love to.
All right. I don't know a lot about India and its laws or anything. Do y'all have any kind of, I don't know, do y'all drink over there a lot? Do y'all have alcohol and everything? I don't know what your culture is. And are there rules against things like alcohol or marijuana or any other kind of use of drugs? Other than, or what we consider drug.
Good morning, everybody. In our country, there are some states where liquor is banned. If suppose somebody is caught with liquor, that person has to face a prison. There are some politicians to win the election. They play the game of banning the liquor. But these politicians, they are not brainiac. They are duffer. They do not understand if they ban the liquor, people will go for something else. People will consume something superior liquor that is harmful for body. And in our country, ladies want, because ladies rarely drink in our country. Only the modern ladies, educated ladies, illiterate ladies do not drink. And they want that these things should be banned, liquor. The reason is when their husband is drunk and they beat their wives black and blue. That is the reason. The ladies do not want there should be a liquor. But in one of our state, 5 years ago, the government has banned. And after that, which they have seen, there were many cases of suicide. There are many cases of they were taking money, police officers from the bootleggers, and were allowing the liquor. That is more harmful. It's better. They should never think, if they are brainiac, that they should ban the liquor. Even marijuana also, I heard in Mexico, it's available, it is legalized. It's good to legalize all these things so government can get the tax, and the police officer and the corrupt system, they can't make the money. Otherwise, the system is going to ruin. But in our country, the politicians, they are not brainiac. They can play any game. Over to the Toastmaster, please.
Thank you, Manish. Great thoughts. Now I know some more about India and about, it's like practically every other state in America. There are some counties that are allowed to drink, some counties that do sell, some, and don't. So that's interesting that that's over there like that too. Now, here's the big question to our Toastmaster, who has presented the topic for tonight and a lot of information about prohibition. Mr. Schroeder, do you think prohibition actually did any good other than to create better organized crime than it did before? When it came back and they took it back out, and they could have put those regulations in at the very beginning, and then there would never have been a need for prohibition in general.
Interesting question. I think that the whole concept of alcohol, these were people that came from Europe, so they already had an exposure to alcohol. A lot of the people, the brewers that were over here, they came from Germany. And in fact, the German beers that they were typically brewing were too strong for the American public. They had to find ways of watering it down toward American tastes. So the people that were coming over were already familiar with beer. And it doesn't take a brainiac to realize that if they came over here with it, starting a culture here that was not going to have it, even though we started with the Victoria, with a very repressive religious and Victorian group of founding fathers, it was still something that was going to be very difficult to outlaw. And in fact, it was even considered safer than water because water had bacteria in it and beer, because of the alcohol, did not. So I think it would have been difficult to make it disappear initially. So then the question is, prohibition, did it do any good or harm? It probably did only temporary harm, and then it was undone. The way I would look at it is it was a mistake that managed to get codified into law for a certain period of time. They then realized the unfortunately worse consequences of doing that. And it wasn't really what the overall population wanted in the first place. It was pushed through probably by a set of temperance people. Temperance at one point meant being reasonable and sane about what you were doing, and it became none at all. At some point, the word changed to mean completely dry, none at all. And I think they would have been better off trying to do education. And people were probably drinking too much. People were doing, on average, half a pint of whiskey a day. And that's a lot. But I think there were better ways to have solved it than prohibition. That is my opinion. I think it did more harm than good.
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. Someone called that the cap to our table topics this evening. So first, do we have our timers report? Did everybody qualify on time?
Yes, everybody qualified on time.
All right, thank you. And a grammarian's report. Did everybody use the word of the day, brainiac?
Yes, they did, Mr. Topic Master. Every contestant used it, and some more than once.
Okay. So now it's time to vote. So if you would, by private chat to Tanya, vote who you thought did the best job at table topics tonight between Dagan, Karen, Manish, and Mark Schroeder. All right. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn the meeting over to our GE for the evening, which is Dagan Newland. Mr. Newland, are you ready to go?
I'm good. Let's go for this. All right. So, as general evaluator, I'm going to call upon the evaluators to give their evaluations of the speakers and also give my evaluation of the meeting as a whole, and also call upon the duties holders to give their report. So, and we'll go in that order. And so we'll call upon our first evaluator, who's going to be Tanya Howard, who is evaluating Mark Sims' speech. So everybody welcome Tanya Howard. Tanya? I think she's frozen. Yeah, she's frozen.
Is she completely frozen?
Yes. Oh, all right, so we'll go ahead and move on to, maybe she come back on. Tanya, if you hear us, yeah, she dropped off. So we'll move on to our next evaluator, who is Rob Giles, who is evaluating Lee Keen's speech. So let's welcome Rob.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. Thank you, Toastmasters, and especially you, Lee. I'm going to tell you a few things that I thought you did really well with your speech. I want to mention a couple of things that I think that you could probably work on regarding this speech and future speeches, and then something that I thought you did really well with for this particular speech. So the things that I thought you did well were, one, organization. and content. The organization was great. You had a good opening, and you led it into a very substantial context and subject with talking about the need for charity, and that set up the whole thing for the leadership. And I thought that that was good. You talked about the fact that charity is needed, but sometimes the workforce can't match what is needed by the charity. And you went into examples for the leadership to help with that. You talked about certain situations, one in 2020, where you have people that are doing Meals on Wheels. And unfortunately, a lot of that workforce is older people that are in the at-risk range. And therefore, during these particular times, they can't help. And there needs to be leadership in order to try to accommodate those things and still have it persevere. You talked about Toastmasters as well, and how the organization and each individual club, not specifically, but the organization in general, all just took over. And as with the world, everybody just started helping everybody. And it was a situation where leadership within organizations and nonprofit organizations actually is something that can work on a larger scale if everybody pitches in. You talked about the fact that in certain situations we have leadership dependence, where in this particular situation with 2020, we didn't actually have the face-to-face, and there was a lot of situations where we had to actually just not necessarily branch out to be with leaders, but we had to listen to the leaders and take it upon us in that respect. They're also with, especially like you said, the 2020, that empathy, because we're all going through the same thing, and leadership can lead us to recognize those things, but that it's different for everybody and it's different for every situation. So you gave great examples where leadership can help us and where leadership is important. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes leadership can't, we can't meet the needs without that leadership for the charities and the volunteer organizations. The couple of things that I thought that you might have added in, I might suggest that you add in next time, is maybe some gestures. I know it's tough. Bring your hands up and maybe talk about thinking about something or doing something on this hand and then maybe doing the opposite this way, so you can give some juxtaposition in regards to those things. You could possibly incorporate a little vocal variety as well. Those are a couple of things that I think that not just for this speech, but for future speeches that you might want to think about trying a little bit more to incorporate. Finally, I just love the whole leadership. I know that Toastmasters, that's, where leaders are made. That's our slogan. So it's very appropriate for us as Toastmasters, but I also liked your closing, specifically talking about what is effective leadership and the needs for positive and empathetic leadership. And those are great things for us in Toastmasters, but beyond. So I thought that that was a great way to close out, and it gave us something to ponder. So you did a great job with that. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, thank you, Rob. And just in case you missed the chat there, Tanya asked if everybody could send the table topic votes back to her again, because I guess, because of our issue there. And now we will move on to our first evaluator, Tanya Howard, who is evaluating Mark Sims Speaks. So take it away, Tanya.
Thank you. Tonight, Mark, you spoke about positive solutions to trying problems. And I really appreciate this topic. And I think it's one that's very relatable for all of us who have been in leadership positions or just going about our day trying to get lunch. I think we can all relate to the examples that you provided for us this evening on how trying situations can be, and really trying to encourage us to take a step back, and instead of bringing those knives out and being a jerk, but looking at more healthy situations and taking a step to be more disciplined is what you would encourage us to do, and be positive and proactive in trying to think about handling them in a better situation. So I think you did a great job of organizing your speech in a way that you introduced it, and then you also provided very specific examples, shaving hours. I think that all of us, if as a supervisor, that is a very natural thing that happens when people are coming in late or leaving early or staying a little bit longer at lunch. That happens all the time, especially when you're trying to get work done. And you also talked about getting that incorrect order. I think we can relate to that, and having to call back to say, hey, and to try to get the situation rectified. And then also the Chick-fil-A double line. I had lunch at Chick-fil-A this afternoon, and I was trying to be very strategic about which line to jump in, because I didn't want to have to wait in the slower line, the person that was taking a lot longer. And so I wanted to pop over. And so I could feel your pain in each of those situations. And I really love too that usually you do a great job of intertwining that humor into your speeches. So, and also I think you do an awesome job of really modeling for the rest of us Toastmasters on incorporating excellent vocabulary in our daily speaking. And you said recompense for my difficulties. I really like that, and judiciously. So thank you for modeling for us how that we can use vocabulary in different ways. One thing that I was thinking too that you could help improve this speech is just that at the end, that closing is really a call to action, really encouraging us to take time to be reflective about our own situation where we may not have been positive, and encouraging us to reframe that situation. So moving forward, that we too can think about trying to put a positive solution into some trying problems and learning from those situations, because we all face them on a daily basis. And so really trying to close out by calling to action, what can we do the next time we're in one of those situations that we all face? But to really just sum up, that I enjoyed the speech tremendously. I thought you did a great job of meeting all of your objectives. Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator.
You're on mute.
Muted, Dagan.
Yes, sorry. So I'll call upon myself for a timer's report, and both speakers did not qualify on time. So I guess we will not vote for the best evaluator. That's all right. So anyway, so I'll go ahead and go to my meeting as a whole, evaluation. And first, we did start a little late, but I know that we were hoping for guests to drop in, but no, I say, let's just go and get started, because, if they jump in, they jump in, but that's me. But, Mark's a Toastmaster, so you made that decision. And speaking of the topic of the meeting tonight, I thought it was pretty good. I learned some information about prohibition, and, some good information about that. So that's always good to learn things during these meetings. And as for our speakers, well, first let me go backtrack. Our duty holders. Duty holders did a really good job on introducing their duty roles, and so that was really good. And the speakers themselves both had wonderful speeches. Mark, I enjoyed your speech. You had a little humor in there, so that's always really good. And the stories you had about your situations, we can all kind of relate to that, I'm sure. And of course, Lee King is always good about when he's talked about leadership and things like that. So, he always does a really great job on that kind of stuff. And now with this table topics, of course, it's always fun when the table topics, match the theme. So that's really good, and had really good questions, I think, that everybody could answer. So when it comes to our evaluators, I know we had a little hiccup with Tanya's connection, but she came back, so that was really good. And so Tanya, your evaluation, is really good. It's gave some good pointers and things that did good, and what you could improve on. Same as you, Rob. Did very well with that as always. And of course, Tanya, I knew you went just a tad bit over, which is a little unlikely like you, but Rob, you still have. I know you still have a little issue with that, but where I sometimes I struggled maybe to make time. Rob, you're always going to the far end of that, but nevertheless, it's always just work on that time, Rob. But overall, it's really outstanding meeting and just wonderful speeches and wonderful evaluations along with table topics. So we'll move on into our duty holders tonight. So they can give us our reports. And the first duty holder is going to be Lee King with posture belt and all counter. So take it away, Lee.
Overall, really good meeting. Karen, I caught one during your table topics response. Dagan, I caught a few ums and he knows. Other than that, I didn't really catch anything as far as crutch words. And I didn't really see anything awkward with posture this evening. So very short report. Back to you, Mr. Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, thank you, Lee. Now I guess the last duty holder is going to be Rob Johns with grammarian. So take it away, Rob.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. I didn't notice anything egregious as far as the use of grammar. I will say there was one thing that Tanya had said, which I think that it's more of a Southern thing. I don't know that it's correct grammar, but she said might could help. And I think that's just something that people in the South say more. So I don't think that I've ever heard anybody that I know up north use that phrase, might could something. So that's something I guess, Tanya, look into that and see if that's correct grammar or not. I don't think that it is. And if not, then.
That sounds good to me.
It's awfully close to maybe could help. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, there you go too. So I don't know that it's something that we can get out of our vocabulary after a certain point in our life, but maybe we can try. I will say a few phrases, a few words that I thought were interesting tonight. I think Mark Sims during his speech, and I want to say, I don't know if he said metal knives or mental knives, but I thought if it was mental knives, that was great.
Mental knives, yes.
Which was great. Very, I don't know if it's a metaphor or what, but it's something good in there. And that's a grammatical thing that I'll have to look up. You said positive, noble thoughts, the old phrase, don't rock the boat. And then you even commented on this, go up the food chain. So I thought that was great. John, you said virtual ribbon. Tanya, during your evaluation, feel your pain, intertwining, and then calling to action, which I always like that phrase because it tells me that something good is about to happen, or at least something's about to happen. I do want to say, word of the day, all the people in our table topics used it, our topic master used it. I will say this, that Munish used it 3 times. So kudos to you, Munish. And I do want to mention this though. This is what they used all the words in. Karen, I think she called herself a brainiac, and then Dagan followed it up with, I'm no brainiac. Munish said that politicians are not brainiacs. And Mark Schroeder said it doesn't take a brainiac. So that was interesting phrases using the word of the day. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, thank you, Rob. So good reports from everybody. So now we'll move on to the vote of the big 3, which is going to be Mark Schroeder, our Toastmaster, John Vessels, our table topic master, or me, Dagan, as the general evaluator. And again, remember to send those votes privately to Tanya Howard. Then we will move on to the Mark Schroeder. You want to take it over, or you done?
Pretty much done. Let me just mention a couple of things just because it all came up during the middle of some of this. It's also interesting that the US government at one point would probably not have survived without the taxes from alcohol. That was one of the things that the alcohol industry before Prohibition had pretty much fought because they didn't want a tax on alcohol. But in order to bring it back for after Prohibition, they were all for it as a rationale for how it could help the US government. And I thought that was interesting when Dagan brought up the issue of the marijuana and taxing marijuana in order to generate more revenue. It was something that was also done with alcohol at one point. So just for what that's worth. That's all. I don't have anything else. Be sure to enjoy the repeal of Prohibition on December 5th, Saturday, and get a little captain in you.
All right, so we'll move on to our president of our meeting, and Mark Stans.
Thank you. And Rob, I would actually prefer Mike could help, because if my boss is ever reprimanding me, say that it might could help if I could do this or that. That's better than him saying I darn well better do it if I know what's good for me. So if you're perceptive enough.
That's the old positive way of putting it, right?
Yes, and I'll settle for that, especially when I'm on the receiving end of things. For starters, Karen, it was good to see you again. And we just want to encourage you come back as much as you want, and definitely we would also enjoy having you as a member. We're always on the lookout for new members and think we'd benefit from you, and hopefully you could benefit from us.
Definitely. I'll be talking to Mark shortly after the our call. I'll give you a call.
We'll do that.
I truly enjoyed the two speeches. They were awesome. I'm over here taking notes. Both of them were awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's good to see you again. And Munish, thank you for participating tonight. And I believe Rob had asked you if you would be in a position to give a speech next week, and I'm sure we could work you in.
I would love to.
Thank you, because you're a very active, very energized speaker, so we could benefit from that. I want to note to all the officers and actually any member that even though this sounds really early, probably in a few weeks, the opportunities for officers training will start up. Actually, I need to get on the website and identify that. But it's interesting, they kind of start near the end of one term and then they extend into they ought to extend into January and maybe even into early February for last chance opportunities. But I'll find out more information about the officers training opportunities. And then also want to remind all the club officers that after this meeting is over, we'll have an officers, the club meeting is over, we'll have an officers meeting tonight and go over a couple of items. And before we get the votes on the best contestants and before the officers meeting, does anyone have any other business to bring up in front of the entire club?
I do.
Yes.
Let me get we're still working on the issue of
Oh, yeah.
a new replacement for the Yahoo group. We'll put something in the chat. This is the one that I'm thinking we're going to go with. It is groups.io. It has looked really good. A little bit of the history on groups.io. It started off originally, I think, as a thing called eGroups. eGroups was eventually purchased and became what is known today as Yahoo Groups. That ought to sound familiar to you. And at some point, the creator of all of that went off away from Yahoo and founded something else, and it's called groups.io. And the features of groups.io look very, very impressive. It is obviously something that the individual who is in charge of it has a passion for. That is one of my concerns with Google Groups. Google Groups has not been maintained or enhanced for years. And I mean almost double-digit years. And when we were looking at that last time, there were rumors or worries that Google Groups might be being discontinued. That was the second choice. I'm a little leery of that one. I only have one concern with groups.io, and that is the IO. It is not a US-based company. It is off in the middle of the, God, where is that? It's off in the middle of like the Mediterranean or something. But the response on it has been fine. There's been a lot of positive reviews on it. They claim no ads, no tracking, as long as I don't find anything bad in their privacy policy. So far, when we have sent messages, test messages back and forth, they've worked really, really well. I had a problem because of the IO. I have a lot of spam filters that block every country except the US, and they got blocked. So I had to enable some stuff to get it turned on. And after doing that, it worked for me. If you have any issues where you're blocking countries, you might or might not experience the same problem. We're going to have to try it to find out if you do. But that is my first choice. I'm going to try to move everybody into that and send out some test messages this week. So be prepared. I'll probably send out one via the Yahoo group while it's working and one via this to make sure that you see both of them, and as opposed to seeing only the Yahoo group one and the other one never arrives. So I may ask for some verification that you're receiving them, just to make sure we don't have any problems. If you happen to know anything about this one or have any negative feedback on this one that would preclude that decision, please get it to me soon. I think that's about it.
Mark, I have a real quick question.
Yes.
So with Yahoo Group, we had to opt in. With IO, do we have to opt in or do we have to opt out if we don't want? In other words, can you opt us in and then we have to opt out if we don't want?
That's a really good question. It looks like I can put people into the list. I have a way it looks like of putting people into the list, which is a feature. Because Rob, I put you in, right? And you were just
Yes.
there?
Yeah.
I put Rob in and I put Dagan in, I believe both, and they were just immediately in. And I should be able to take the original list and import it. I think the biggest question that I'm going to face is, do I take everybody out of the Yahoo group that's in it now? Many of whom, I mean, they've all been members, but they may not be current members. And I have a question as to whether or not I should ask them if they do not want to be migrated. If I did anything, I would ask them if they do not want to be migrated, rather than ask them if they do, because I'd rather have the default be that they go in. But that's really the only question that I have on my, because we probably have got 200 people in our Yahoo group with all of the ex-members that we've never cleaned out. And I'd hate to do it any other way, because I know there are certain people who were members years and years ago that still get it and still occasionally come. I mean, I know Tiffany still likes getting them. I know Mark Haddad still shows up. So we have some older members. I can't do it really by date. I could sort through them and figure out who to take out and who to keep, maybe. But I'd much rather keep everybody in if I can.
Well, I say if they haven't opted out of the Yahoo one, then it should be fine.
That's my opinion too. My only concern is when they opted into Yahoo, they knew they were opting into Yahoo. I want to at least give them the option to say it's not Yahoo anymore. Do you have a problem with it? I'm going to claim it's fine. I'm going to tell them what I know about it being fine and say, we're going to put you in it unless you tell us otherwise. But I don't believe they'll have to opt in.
Hey, Mark, this may seem really dumb, but is it possible that the people that run IO could use that to put some type of malware on our computers?
No, it's just like everything else.
Okay.
I mean, it really, except for exactly what's in the headers and trailers, it looks like Yahoo Mail. It really does.
Okay, great.
If you haven't seen one of them, let me see if I've got one easily that I can show just real quickly. Oops, that's not that window. Where? Okay, one, I think I put some in here. Let me look for one real quick. Groups.io. Okay, put the S on it and you'll find them. Okay, there's one. So let me go ahead and do a quick share and I'll show you.
The votes while you're looking.
Yeah, I just, because I didn't want everybody to see everything. So here was one, for instance, the original had DSTM members in it and the title, just the test. And so what you see is this was Rob's reply to me. Said we might as well test it. So here was my original email. There was Rob's reply. And again, it looks fairly much like a Yahoo. Down here, we have a couple of things that are links in terms of, and what your settings are. You'll receive everything. There is a reply to group, reply to sender. You can mute a topic if you don't want to look at it anymore, start a brand new email, change your settings. Again, fairly simple, looks like Yahoo. I did try attachments. I sent out like agendas, the PDFs, I believe. Don't know that I have a ready example of that, but we did do some of those. Attachments seem to work fine as well. And quite frankly, except for what's in the headers and trailers, Google Groups looks very similar to. My only concern is the longevity. I think these guys are much more committed to keeping this going than Google Groups is. We are going to be doing a free option. They do have a pay option. If we have to go to pay at the current level that they have, we couldn't afford it. It's $11 a month. But at the moment, the free one is good enough.
Thank you.
Is there a limit on the number of people?
I could not find a limit on the number of people even on the free
So what are
one.
the advantages for going to paid? I mean, obviously not for us, but I'm just trying to get a better idea of what the difference between a paid subscription and the free one is.
Let's see. Premium features. Let's see if it says. Premium features would be things that are fully integrated with the group, like a calendar to schedule events and send reminders, unlimited number of chat rooms, poll feature, ask questions so that you can ask questions of the group, full featured database where you can define tables and column types, sections for uploading photos and files. It's basically a full Yahoo group again, plus even more.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about if we end up with, say, 300 people on the list, now we're going to have to start paying type situation.
Not from what I saw, no. From what I saw, it looked like as long as it was one group, it was unlimited. Now, the premium one does give you the ability to have subgroups as well. That's one of the other features.
Oh,
But we haven't been using that with Yahoo, so I don't know that we need it here. Other questions? Okay, back to you, Mark.
Thank you. This time, let's hear from Tanya on who our winners were.
Okay, for the best speaker, we had Mark Sims. Congratulations. Then for the best table topic, we have Karen Smith.
Hey.
Sorry. And then for big three is Dagan Newland. Congratulations.
Okay. Thank you all. And at this time, we will exit our club meeting and then very shortly segue into the officers meeting. So thank you all so much and look forward to seeing you next week.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, all, and we will close the recording out in 3, 2,